Welcome to the webinar, Preparing for your Retake of the Content Knowledge Certification Exams. My name is Tracy Vasquez and I am here at Grand Canyon University in the College of Education. And most likely by this point you have taken your Content Knowledge exam and did not receive passing scores, but that's okay. Most students, if they don't pass on the first attempt, they will pass on their second attempt. So not to worry, but you do need to focus your efforts in your preparing for the retake. So that's what we'll be going over today. Currently all attendees are muted, and that is to help eliminate background noise. However, if you do have a question or a comment throughout the presentation and would like to participate, you can raise the hand icon next to your name, and I will be able to unmute you. Or you can type in the questions box below, and I will be able to bring your questions address the group with those questions. So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording may be posted on our professional learning network, so any participants who participate vocally or with written questions, those will also be a part of the recording. Okay, today's agenda, we will be analyzing prior exam results, study solutions for your learning style, practice questions, study chart, preparation log and reflection. So this webinar will be focusing on preparing for your retake of the Content Knowledge Certification exams. And we hope that through this material you are able to be intentional in your dedication and preparation, that you read through this module in its entirety, and you develop a study chart for your test preparations. Following the webinar, I will be sending you a copy of the presentation so you'll be able to go through it more at your own leisure. We do want to remind you that preparing for our Content Knowledge Certification exam is closely aligned with our College of Education conceptual framework of learning, reading, and serving. We hope that as you go through the components of the program, all of the coursework and clinical practice experiences, that you're able to develop towards that acceptable level of beginning teacher preparation, and that through those experiences you become more prepared for the educator exams. Now let's get to analyzing prior exam results. If you're a teacher candidate in Arizona, you likely have an NES Score Report. This is a copy of the information from the NES Score Report. If you're from another state where there's other providers of the exams, you will have a score report that maybe looks a little bit different, but essentially it will contain the same information. You have a listing of all of the times you've taken the exam with the test date, the test score, and the national benchmark. And then you have a detailed report of the diagnostic information on your performance for the exam. Now, if you go in to take your exam at one of those computer testing centers, very likely after you finish the test, you were given an unofficial score report letting you know if you passed or failed. But they did not have the diagnostic information at that time. The diagnostic information becomes available a little bit later. So you'll either get that through email or through some sort of a portal a little bit after the test date. Now this test taker did pass the exam, but I want to draw some things to your attention first, as if the test taker did not pass the exam. So if this test taker did not pass the exam, what are some of the domains and competency areas that we could attribute that to? If you were looking at this as a peer, looking at your friend's score report, what might you say to your peer or colleague? You can raise the hand icon next to your name, or you can type in the questions box below. Looks like we have a little bit of a quiet group today, but take a look at each of these domains. Domain 1, language development. There was 8 questions, and 88% of the questions were correct. So our test taker did fairly high in this area. And then with competency number 2, 7 questions, 71% correct. That's pretty good. And domain 3, similar, also pretty good. 4, there were 7 questions, only 57% of these questions were correct. So we would say that could be a bit concerning. Do you understand what is covered in competency number 4? We might advise our friend to take a closer look at the exam framework to see what exactly is covered in competency number 4, and is that something that you maybe misunderstood or you could use some resources in. Domain 5, 8 questions, 88%, good. And then let's look at social studies. Now our test taker scored in the 50th percentiles for social studies. Only 50% of the questions were right for domain 6 and 7, and only 57% of the questions were correct for domain competency 8. So if this test taker did not pass the test, I would certainly recommend that they review the test framework for competency 4, but I would also strongly recommend that they spend some time studying social studies, because clearly with 50% correct, that could have just been a guess. Clearly they did not have a firm foundation in social studies. So the test framework can really help us once we've determined the areas that where we were weak. Because as we saw here on this testing report, domain 4, competency 4 was very low, with only 57% correct. But purpose of text and graphic sources is not very clear. What exactly was covered in that competency? And for that, we have to go to the test framework. So let's take a look here. I'm going to pull up the test framework for this exam. And if you're not taking an NES test, if you're taking the Praxis, for example, it's called a study companion. It's not called a test framework, but it covers the same types of information. So here we get detailed information on what's covered in each competency area and each domain area. Oh, and this is subtest 2. So actually the score report we were looking at is for subtest 1. So let's go ahead and bring that one up. Reading English Language Arts. And as we saw here on this sample score report, we're looking for competency number 4. And here, competency number 4, understand literary, informational, persuasive, functional texts, and graphic sources. We have to know knowledge of characteristics of various literary genres, recognize diverse genres of children's literature, demonstrate knowledge of the characteristics and features of various types of informational, persuasive, functional texts, and strategies for promoting students' comprehension for various types of texts, and demonstrate knowledge of the characteristics and features of various types of graphic sources. Okay, so from that, that can give us a few clues as to what to study for the retake. Now, when we're preparing for a retake, we also need to consider our learning style, because it's not going to help much if you're studying in a method that is not compatible with the way your mind thinks. We like to suggest that teacher candidates use study methods that align with their preferred learning style. So as I ask the following questions, think about how you would respond, and think about this in context of your preparation process. How do I learn best? Do I require a quiet space to study? Do I prefer to read information first and then try to apply it? Do I work best at a task in large or small chunks? Now you can get to know your learning style. And you'll find that most likely you fall primarily into one of these four categories: visual, spatial, kinesthetic, linguistic, or auditory. Personally, I find that I am more visual spatial. And when I'm studying for an exam, I like to draw thinking maps or concept maps. And that way, not only am I learning the material while I'm creating the thinking map, but also then I have a tool to refer back to quickly when I'm just reviewing a concept. The way that I can see the pictures and the maps in my head will help me remember that content. But you may find that you're a different type of learning style. Sometimes our kinesthetic learners also find a benefit in just walking on a treadmill while they're studying. Sometimes just that motion helps them remember the content. Next, I'd like to emphasize that you take time to schedule your preparations. And you can do this by making a to-do list. Make a to-do list of individual tasks that you're going to do to learn the content you need to learn. You may just have a small portion of content that you need to study this time. If we look at our sample test taker, we saw that he or she does not need to study all of those English language arts competencies again. He or she did very well in most of them. But it was just a few small areas where a study session could help intervene. And studying for your retake does take 7 to 10 hours per week. So you could estimate about an hour per day, or 2 hours every other day. But make sure that time is worthwhile by making your to-do list. That way you can check off tasks and move on. So here's samples of some ideas for you to put on your to-do list. You may have a combination of these during one study session. If you have 2-hour or even 3-hour study sessions, you could do multiple items in each study session. Maybe you're going to view a video to review certain pieces of information, and then you're going to go read an online tutorial, and then you're going to take some journal notes about what you remembered. So make sure it's active study time where you're actually doing certain items while you're studying, and that way you'll be sure that you're working towards your goal and that you're not, zoning out or becoming distracted and wasting your study time. So we call this active preparation. So it includes using the thinking or memorization technique that works best with your learning style. Some of these techniques include acronyms, flashcards, outlines, concept maps, or summarizing, such as writing in a journal. If you'd like to learn more about some of these techniques, I have a few links here which you'll be able to access once I send you this presentation via email. I'm not going to go through all of those right now, but think about what works best for you. Some students really like to do flashcards. You can create your own flashcards, or you can even purchase flashcards to prepare for an exam, or you can create digital flashcards on like a Google Docs, for example. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about practice questions. If you've already taken your content exam, you already have that diagnostic report. But if you still feel apprehensive about taking the exam, you can take a practice test to gauge your readiness before you go in and spend the money on another full exam retake. Or there's practice questions that you can find free on locations online, such as YouTube. Just make sure you know what you're doing, because if you get into a site that asks for your credit card information, for example, it could be a scam. So make sure you're not paying for anything that should be for free. And make sure whatever resources you're looking at are helping prepare you for the content that you need to learn based upon your review of the competencies and domains that your score report demonstrated you were weak in. Now, GCU does not endorse any particular external companies, but we are not going to deny that they're not out there. We just want you to be wary of what you're getting yourself into. You also can purchase a practice test from your exam provider. I've listed a few here for AEPA, NES, or ETS, such as the Praxis. But I wanted to bring to your attention a few practice test pros and cons. The practice test will only give you a rough idea of how you might score, because they're not going to tell you exactly which questions you scored right and wrong. They're going to give you a scale of how well you did in each domain area, just like that score report you received after your first attempt at the content exam. You'll get some experience test taking in a format similar to when you take the exam. You'll get familiar with test question language and format, and you'll practice using your own personal test-taking strategies in answer selection. But some practice test cons: you do have to pay for this exam provider practice test. You do not get to go back and review the questions after you've completed the test. And you're using valuable study time when you're taking a practice test, where you could be using those 2-3 hours to actually study for your retake. The practice test is not a study tool. It does not guarantee you will pass the exam. It's only to give you a rough estimate of how well you might perform on the exam. If you already have your score report from your first attempt, you likely do not need to take a practice test, because you're going to be getting that same information. But one more thing about a practice test is you don't receive any benefit from studying practice test questions, because a question is only representative of one small piece of the content you're required to know for the exam. The question could be represented in some different way when you actually come to your test day. Sometimes you'll hear test takers say, "I studied for my exam, but what I studied was not even on the exam." That's usually when you know that that test taker studied practice questions. If you study the actual content, you will be well on your way to performing on test day. I'd like to recommend that you make a study chart. So before you make a study chart, you're going to need to analyze your exam results. Hopefully you have your exam results handy. You can pull them out now if you would like. Now you're going to be looking at the number of questions, the percentage correct, and you're going to look for patterns within and among test results. So let's go back to our practice score report here. We drew attention to competency 4, And overall, the pattern within Domain 1 is that our test taker did fairly well, and Domain 2, Social Studies, fairly poorly. So overall, I would say this test taker needs to focus primarily on Social Studies. So referring to the domain areas that we identified from analysis of our score results, we're going to list those domain areas in order of priority based upon your need and the percentage of test questions, and try to identify 4 domain areas you need to focus on. So this aligns with our sample. Reading and English Language Arts domain number 4 is listed as priority 1 only because we see here that the majority of test questions come from Reading and English Language Arts. And even though Domain 4 only had 7 questions on this particular test, there could be 8 questions on the next test. So we'd like to emphasize Reading and English Language Arts Domain 4 first, then Social Studies Domain 6, 7, and 8. Now we can begin to gather study materials. You can look for study materials that align to these 4 domain areas. You're looking up on the test framework or study companion exactly what content you need to learn, and then you're finding study materials that review that content. So you may find lecture notes, textbooks, journals, homework assignments, review papers, or reputable websites. Also, we want you to know that GCU does offer resources. I have a few steps here for the GCU tutor track. This is our online tutoring service. Make sure that if you do make an appointment, that you save it to confirm it. And if you change your mind and are unable to meet the registered time slot, make sure you complete the appointment cancellation section. Here are a list of websites that are external to GCU that offer test preparation. As a reminder, GCU does not endorse any particular external companies. This is a sample study chart. Now this is where you're going to organize those domains that you've already identified, those resources that you have identified that align with each domain area, and you're going to keep them in this 4-block organizational feature so that you know your top section is priority number 1. And here's a sample of one of our students' study charts. This is the primary focus, Math Domain 1. She's listed online resources that she's found that align with that domain, and she's included some notes that help her keep each of those straight. And then once you have your study chart, you can plan your approach to the study chart. I recommend this 6-week method for a retake. You remember about an hour per day or 2 hours every other day. Review the resources for your primary area of difficulty. Start with one domain area for 1 hour a day or 2 hours every other day. Then after about a week, and you are gaining confidence in your domain of primary importance, you can begin to integrate resources to help you with your second domain listed on the study chart. Now you are spending 30 minutes a day on the first domain and 30 minutes a day on the second domain. After another week, change your focus. Move to a third domain. Study intensely on the third domain area for 30 minutes a day, and then review the other 2 domains for 30 minutes a day. After about a week, you are gaining confidence in this area. Move to your fourth domain. Now you are spending 30 minutes a day on the fourth domain and 30 minutes a day reviewing prior domains. After about a week, return to your test framework. Review these 4 domain areas again. Gauge your confidence level in each of these areas. Maybe try some practice questions in each of these areas to help you identify areas of strength and or weakness. Week 6, spend as much time as you need reviewing the concepts and reassessing your growth as you continue your preparations. So about a 6-week plan to study for your retake is appropriate because with most exams, you can't retake until the following month anyway. So this way you're making good use of that time that you have between retakes. So here's a completed copy of your week-by-week plans. Next, I'd like to show you this reflection log and documentation. This is a way for you to keep track of the hours you've been putting into your preparations. You see this does go to 12 weeks. 12 weeks may not be necessary for you for a retake, so you can cross out whatever columns you don't need. But essentially you'll start with week 1, put the dates for the week, and then keep track of how many hours you spend each day. So this candidate spent 1 hour on Monday, going down the column, 1 hour on Tuesday, 2 hours on Wednesday, 1 hour on Thursday, 0 hours on Friday, 2 hours on Saturday, and 1 hour Sunday for a total of 8 hours. And that way, as the weeks go on, he or she can look back and see, am I getting enough hours each week to feel fully prepared? Am I getting 7 to 10 hours per week? And if not, maybe I need to make some adjustments to my schedule. And I do recommend that these reflection questions are also answered at the end of each week. It helps you reflect upon how your preparations are going and what adjustments you need to make. Make sure that you're making good use of your preparation time. Is there an area that you made improvements in? Is there an area you know you still need some more help in, that you know you need additional resources in? Maybe you need to make some alterations. Maybe you need to start studying in a different location. Maybe you need to move to the 2-hour every other day method. Next, I just want to go through a few tips for mental preparation. Once you have prepared for your retake, I want you to consider the following questions. What challenges did I have on my prior exam attempt? What progress have I made since my prior attempt? How can I avoid those challenges on my retake attempt? What exam-taking strategies will I utilize for success? I'll email you some additional exam strategies so that you can have a copy of those as well. And I'm going to email you a copy of this presentation. So you will get a chance to review that information as you work towards your study chart and your plan for preparing for your retake. I just wanted to share with you these other tips for the morning of the test. I would hate for a small inconvenience such as being cold ruin your test day, so make sure you dress in layers. I also strongly suggest that you avoid people who are anxious and might cause you to doubt your knowledge. Remember, you need to go in there with calm confidence, knowing that you have studied for this retake and you are ready to pass. So give yourself that pep talk. So good luck on your exam. We do have a few time for questions. So if you'd like to raise the hand icon next to your name or the questions box to type in your questions, we'll be able to get to those questions right now. It doesn't look like we have any questions, but I do hope that you all have a wonderful test day. Again, my name is Tracy Vasquez. If you have any follow-up questions, you are welcome to email the College of Education at coe@gcu.edu. Again, that's coe@gcu.edu. And again, my name is Tracy. Thank you for joining me today. Take care. Bye-bye.